activities had it not been for the release of 16,000 pages of documents in 1977 through the FOIA request filed by the surviving family of Frank Olson. Unfortunately, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of any MKUltra records shortly before the order came in to his office, leaving an incomplete picture of a concerted effort by various agencies to create new and better means of controlling the thoughts, emotions, and thus behavior of unsuspecting individuals. Okay, now these are official things. Test weapons on America. CNN.com, Air Force Chief, test weapons on testy U.S. mobs. Air Force Secretary Michael Wynne stated in 2007 that non-lethal weapons should be tested on U.S. civilians before being used on the battlefield, referring to the use of EM weapons in crowd control situations. The object is basically public relations, said Wynne. Domestic use would make it easier to avoid questions from others about possible safety considerations. So that's kind of important, and I think he was fired after that. Air Force Chief, test weapons on testy U.S. mobs. Air Force Secretary Michael Wynne stated in 2007 that non-lethal weapons should be tested on U.S. civilians before being used on the battlefield, referring to the use of EM weapons in crowd control situations. Now, I think CNN has that wrong. I think that's a little bit of a spin there because they don't know what he was referring to. And I am having non-lethal weapons, which they're very lethal over long periods of time, directed energy weapon systems. I'm having those tested on me right now. V2K, remote neural monitoring, remote neural manipulation. Now, what CNN did in here, and we've got to look at news closely, guys, because this is from a CNN.com article. Now, what they did is they spun the story so that it would make people automatically just think that everybody knew what this guy was talking about, when that's not true at all. You read this, Air Force Secretary Michael Wynne stated in 2007 that non-lethal weapons should be tested on U.S. civilians before being used on the battlefield. Now they say referring to the use of EM weapons in crowd control situations, but they don't know that because I have these weapons being tested on me directly in my home, as many other TIs do too. And so that when you see things like that, when the news is kind of basically deciding what he meant, which you can't do that. It's not balanced. The object is basically public relations, said Wynne. Domestic use would make it easier to avoid questions from others about possible safety considerations, and he was fired soon afterwards. I think he was talking about testing it on mobs of people and direct testing, which is widespread now among targeted individuals. Okay, more remote control humans. Robert A. Monroe in 1993, Method for Inducing Mental, Emotional, and Physical States of Consciousness, including specific mental activity in human beings, patented by Robert A. Monroe, practitioner of remote viewing, founder of the Monroe Institute in Charlottesville, Virginia. Specific states of consciousness can be induced through generation of stereo audio signals having specific wave shapes. Human brain waves in the form of EEGs are superimposed upon specific stereo audio signals, known as carrier frequencies, which are within the range of human hearing. So we're going to go down to do's here. Directed energy weapons. A detailed study conducted by Andrei G. Pakhomov, Yahya Achiel, Olga N. Pakhomova, Bruce E. Stuck, and Michael R. Murphy with the Brooks Air Force Base Human Effectiveness Directorate offers a scientific analysis of the effects of millimeter waves. Current state and implications of research on biological effects of millimeter waves, a literature review. McKesson Bioservices, U.S. Army Medical Research Detachment of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research and Directed Energy Bioeffects Division, Human Effectiveness Directorate, Air Force Research Laboratory, Brooks Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. Weapons are for enemies, no citizens. Why hasn't the weapon been more widely used for war? It doesn't have the success rate needed to be reliably used for war in place of ground troops. It probably is being used as a supplement. According to European Parliament documents, it was used in Desert Storm to fatigue and demoralize troops. Also, if it were successfully used in war once, countries would invest more into anti-psychotic defenses. So it is considered more valuable as a political dissident silencing, spying, espionage, and silent assassination tool. So that's pretty important. I'm going to go back and read that. Weapons are for enemies, no citizens. Why hasn't the weapon been more widely used for war? It doesn't have the success rate needed to be reliably used for war in place of ground troops. It probably is being used as a supplement. According to the European Parliament documents, it was used in Desert Storm to fatigue and demoralize troops. Also, if it were successfully used in war once, countries would invest more into anti-psychotic defenses. So it is considered more valuable as a political dissident silencing, spying, espionage, and silent assassination tool. I'm going to see, let's see, let's go down to this. The subliminal is real. This is Nexus Magazine in 1988. Military Use of Mind Control Weapons by Judy Wall in 1998. PSYOPs, weaponry used in the Persian Gulf War. Subliminally, a much more powerful technology was at work, a sophisticated electronic system to speak directly to the mind of the listener and artificially implant negative emotional states, feelings of fear, anxiety, despair, and hopelessness. This subliminal system doesn't just tell a person to feel an emotion, it makes them feel it. It implants that emotion in their minds. Presentation system carries cloned emotional signatures. The result is overwhelming. So this was from Nexus Magazine in October, November 1998. So go down to, and these are just some, these are some articles, things from articles, documentation and things like that just really make, can just show the public definitely and target individuals. We know this stuff exists, but just kind of putting more information out there. And I think bigger things are happening this year. I'm hoping there will be huge changes, this year in our plight, because my body, my mind and my body can barely take just the constant signals and then the torture with the streams of energy from the directed energy weapon systems. So I'm really praying for some miracles, next year. But I do want to just keep on putting out concrete information for the public to say, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. 2 + 2 = 4. To just keep on putting this stuff out in front of people's faces, just reading, websites and documentation, just so people can become acclimated to, hey, this is real and people are being killed and experimented on. Something that target individuals, we live 24 hours a day of our lives. We're, hit by directed energy weapons in a hot war. We have MK Ultra being done to us from afar by electromagnetic frequencies. We live it 24 hours a day, a horrible nightmare of our lives, and we fight together. We try and band together to get information out. But any of the public who's not aware of this, we want to get as much information out there and say, hey, this stuff exists. Hey, they're using it. Hey, they've used it before. Our governmental agencies, the CIA, DARPA. These agencies are trying to advance and do research and development on these weapons and what they can do, especially interconnect it with the brain and the nervous system, which I call mind rape. Basically putting in visuals and inner voice thoughts and overwhelming your senses so that it basically is interfering with your own thought processes through electromagnetic frequencies directed to the brain and the nervous system, which sometimes if they do enough signals just all the time, it becomes unbearable where you can't even think. You try and think your own thoughts and it's shoved down by some somebody on either chatterbox, either an automated program with something being shoved into your inner voice through your throat and your jaw, electromagnetic frequencies back into your throat and your jaw to shove inner voices, like to make to make your inner voice come out is what they are putting in, or actual visuals in your visual cortex, extensive just overload of the mind and the senses, to where what you're trying to think and what you're trying to do is just bombarded and raped, so that you can't. Like yesterday, I had to just get into my enclosure. Like I was going to read some comic books to kind of get my mind off of things, but the chatterbox was going just so, it was like, blah, 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 blah. And then when I would think anything in my inner voice, they would interject something in between that. And I noticed that, with the inner voice synthetic telepathy, my throat was burning that day a lot more. And there seemed to be a lot more pressure like around my Adam's apple, and it seemed like they were putting pressure on my throat. And then I noticed that the inner voice thing, the synthetic telepathy, became a lot more powerful last night. They've switched footing, because I've got in my bunker, and it is attenuating a lot of frequencies. I'm listening to Dave CD, so it's kind of unentraining me a lot. So what they did last night, and I'll tell y'all more about this later. But what my attackers did last night, and this is kind of more of my proof that, a lot of this is automated, but this is people on shifts. These are like ex-military or ex-agency workers, or, masons, whoever is networking into these third-party contractors. They are on shifts on these remote platforms, because they switched it to, they weren't able to, with the entrainment, get as many visuals into my visual cortex. So what they did last night when I went into my bunker is they hit me with heterodyning of four streams of directed energy. So one to the top of my head, then I had one coming into the side to the left, then I had one to the back of my head, one to the front of my head. So they did this heterodyning with four beams, and after they did that for a while at a hardcore rate, this heterodyning of those frequencies, and heterodyning just means putting things together, mixing them. So they were mixing those. Then I started to have these very, very clear, vivid visuals in my visual cortex, ugly, ugly, horrific things that I was not thinking, visuals into my mind, and it was done not by entrainment, but by a heterodyning that only took a couple of minutes. So they changed footing, and I got another one of their, a protocol that's probably been used on me before, but I hadn't realized it because I'd, had a lot of the entrainment from remote neural manipulation, remote neural monitoring. And so last night I really experienced it and knew for sure that some of these very vivid visuals for a couple minutes were produced by an intense heterodyning of four streams of energy to my head, like in cross sections, one to the back of my head, one to the front of my head, one to the top of my head, and then one to the left side. So it's basically these four streams of energy, these four frequencies coming together and heterodyning in the center of my head to be able to affect my visual cortex. This is dangerous stuff. This is a hot war. Just screaming, I'm screaming out to the public right now. There are lots of people we're being experimented on. This is horrible torture. I'm trying to get information out as well as a lot of other target individuals, but we need help from you guys and the public. Wherever you are, whoever you are, if you are a good human being, please understand that this is happening. Please understand that they're experimenting on all age groups, from in the womb to almost dying at 100 years old, 86-year-old women, to teenage girls, to 5-year-old boys. It's this is happening on a global scale by I know agencies here and agencies in other countries. So I'm screaming this out, and I think this year is going to be better. So I'm trying to, stay on the positive side. But, this is survival for me and a lot of other target individuals. We're trying to push this along so we can have our freedom and our lives back, and so that, I don't even know what the consequences are to my brain and my nervous system and my body. I mean, I could get